Good evening, everyone. My name is Raqad Mohamed, and I will be the moderator for today's session. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's lecture, which is Crafting Continuity, Youth, Skills, Transitions, and the Future of African Heritage. This is brought to you by Hayaan Heritage. And I would like to welcome Nasteha to tell us more about Hayaan and what it does before we continue with today's session. Welcome, Nasteha.
Thank you very much, Raqad. I hope I'm audible enough. Can you just hear me? Anyways, I'm going to go on. I'm Nasteha again. Hayaan Heritage itself as an organization focuses on promoting, documenting and preserving the Somali culture, history, heritage, archaeological places and sites and stuff. We do hold webinars like this most of the times, educational webinars that are just most of the times held by people that are prominently known and people that hold value in the sections that we work in, like preserving the cultures. We have a lot of, I'm very sorry, it's just, okay. I should not focus on that. We have scientists, archaeologists, heritage preservers who normally come here to teach us more about it. We focus mostly as Hayaan Heritage. When I say we, I mean as Hayaan Heritage, mostly on educating the youngsters who are still who do not have knowledge on what they are, who normally find it hard to answer the questions of what are you as a Somali. To people who have difficulty in answering those questions, we're trying to minimize that. So we normally try to find every possible way that we can bring across the informations. And the webinars mostly, they include, heritage preservations, role of Somali women and the oral traditions, the Somali music, traditional music, and the sites that are ignored and neglected and not researched upon. And so today we have Munira and Raqad who are going to be telling us more about it. But I just wanted to let you guys know that, I want to tell you about Hayaan. I don't know if I've said enough. But I'm going to give it to Raqad and Munir to go on. Everyone is welcome to write down their questions and everything they want to ask. I think Raqad will be informing you about it, but you can write down the questions on the section that you want to write the questions, or you can ask Raqad directly by raising your hand. Thank you very much. I'm leaving it to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so before we get started, we are going to have a Q&A session once Munira is done presenting. So if you have any questions, you can leave it in the chat box or you can raise your hand and we'll give you the opportunity to ask any questions after the presentation. So now I would like to officially get started on today's topic. So today's lecture is Crafting Continuity, Youth, Skills, Transitions, and the Future of African Heritage. This invites us to reflect on a very important question. What does it really mean to preserve our heritage? When we think of heritage, we often think of museums, monuments, historical collections, but heritage is also found in knowledge, craftsmanship, and traditions passed down through generations. So if those skills are no longer practiced or taught to future generations, we risk losing not only the craft itself, but also the stories, the identity, and the cultural knowledge that gives those specific objects its meaning. So today's discussion is going to be thinking beyond preserving objects. Instead, consider how we can preserve the knowledge, the skills that keeps this culture alive, particularly empowering young people to become the next generation of custodians of our African heritage. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker today, Ms. Munira Bonnet. And I would like to give a background history about Ms. Munira. Ms. Munira is a museum development and cultural continuity advisor and the founder of Continuum Africa, actually, which is over 25 years of international experience working across museums, collections, craftsmanships, and also her work explores how museums can move beyond preserving just objects and preserve knowledge, skills, craftsmanship, and creating them through her organization, which is Continuum Africa. So I would like to give this opportunity for her to introduce more about herself and get started on today's presentation. Welcome, Munira.
Thank you so much, Raqad. I think the introduction has already been done, so I'll just get on to it. Good afternoon. Thank you to Hayaan Heritage for the invitation. When I accepted this invitation, I asked myself a simple question. What could I say today that will have meaning in the next 10 years? Heritage is a subject that we return to often. We speak about museums, we speak about monuments, archives, and conservations. Conservation is important. I simply do not believe it's where our greatest challenge begins. The reason I wanted to give this lecture is because I'm increasingly concerned that we're taking our knowledge for granted. Not because we do not value it, quite often because we assume someone else already knows what we know. We assume someone already recorded the story. We assume somebody still knows how to make the object. We assume traditional knowledge continues simply because it existed for generations. History suggests otherwise. Knowledge rarely disappears overnight. A craftsperson retires. A material is replaced. A technique is simplified. An object continues to exist, but the understanding behind it gradually fades. None of these changes seem particularly significant on its own. Taken together, they quietly reshape what a society remembers about itself. Over the past 25 years, I have worked with museums, historic collections, craftsmanship in different parts of the world. I have watched extraordinary objects survive while the knowledge behind it becomes increasingly difficult to find. That experience has taught me something very simple. Objects rarely disappear first, knowledge does. The object is usually the last survivor. By the time we begin asking who still knows how to make it, restore it, or explain it, there are often very few people left to ask. When I began looking closely at Somali living traditions, I was not discovering a new challenge. I was recognizing one that I already knew. Before we continue, I would like you to keep one question in your mind. It's a very simple question. If this disappears tomorrow, could we make another one? I'm not asking whether we could make a copy of its appearance. I'm not asking whether we still understand enough to recreate it with the same material, or the same technique, or the same judgment, and the same understanding that produced the original. There is an important difference between the reproduction of an object and reproducing the knowledge behind it. That difference is where this lecture begins. Great, thank you. Whenever I look at this photograph, I do not begin by looking at the people. I begin by looking at what they are wearing, the cloth, the jewelry, the objects they're carrying. To most people, those details those are just details. To me, they're evidence. Every one of these objects existed because somebody knew how to make it, selected the materials, refined the design, and spent years learning the craft before passing it on to someone else. Much of what we see in this photograph is no longer part of everyday life. Many people no longer dress like this. Some of these objects have disappeared completely. Others survived only on special occasions. That is not unusual. Culture evolves. The question is whether, as they evolve, we continue to understand what these objects are representing, how they were made, and whether anyone still possessed the knowledge to recreate them. The photograph records the result. It cannot tell us who wove the cloth, who shaped the jewelry, who carved the object, who taught those skills, or whether anyone still remembers them today. That is why, over the years, I gradually stopped asking, "What is this?" and started asking, "Who still knows how to do this?" That one question changed the conversation completely. The object remains important, but my intention shifts to people. Because every museum began in somebody's hand long before it arrived on someone else's collection. Next image, please. Next, the woman braiding. No. I would like to show you one more historical photograph because it captures something the previous image cannot. It does not simply show us the outcome of the knowledge. It shows us knowledge being passed on from one person to another. This image comes from the book British Somaliland. The caption describes the dressing of Somali girls' hair as carefully and a labor-intensive process with the same method, or slightly variation of it, used throughout the country. The hair has grown to a particular length, carefully parted, braided into dozens of around the head, each one finished with a small tuft at the end. What interests me most on this hairstyle itself, it is the hands. One woman is doing the work, another one is receiving it. This was not a skill learned from a book or a classroom. It was learned through observation, repetition, practice, and passed on from one generation of woman to another. The woman braiding the hair, not yet. The woman braiding the hair today has almost certainly spent years sitting exactly where the young woman is sitting now. There was never meant to be a written manual for this. The knowledge lived in the doing. It was repeated so often that it became instinctive. That is also what makes it vulnerable. When knowledge depends entirely on practice, it survives only while people continue practicing it. Once that chain is interrupted, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to recover. I often think about this photograph alongside the necklace you're about to see, because together they tell a story of a woman. The hairstyle communicates identity just as deliberate as the jewelry did. Both required skills, both carried meaning, both were maintained by women. Both were passed from a woman to a woman, and today both are becoming increasingly difficult to find or practiced. So I come back to the same question I asked in the beginning of this lecture. If this disappears tomorrow, could we recreate it? Not the photograph, not admiring it in an archive or museum. Could we place our hands on somebody's hair and reproduce the same technique with the same confidence, understanding, exactly as it was being done generations before? That question applies just as much to the hairstyle as it does to the stool, necklace, and Raqad or coal bottle. It is never just the object that matters. It is the knowledge that allows it to exist. Next image, please. This stool. This is one of the objects I remember most clearly from my childhood. I remember sitting beside the fire with my mother and my grandmother, preparing anjera. The stool was always there. As a child, I never questioned it. It was simply part of everyday life. It was only much later, after years of working with the museums and historical collections, that I began looking at this in a different eye. It seemed to suit everyone. Children sat on it comfortably. Adults sat on it comfortably. Somebody had already solved that problem long before I was born. The sheepskin made it comfortable throughout the year, never too cold and never uncomfortably hot beside the fire. That was not accident either. Somebody has experimented with different materials and settled on one that worked best. Then there's the height. It naturally brings your body closer to the ground, allowing you to move between seating, squatting, and standing without effort. These were not decisions made by engineers or designers working from drawing. They were refined, made by generations of people using the object every single day. If something did not work, it changed. If it worked well, it remained. To me, that is one of the most intelligent forms of design because it was tested by life itself. When I look at this tool today, I see far more than a piece of furniture. I see generations of observation, refinement, practical intelligence. It reminds me that some of the most successful designs were never created in a workshop or labs. They were shaped quietly through everyday life by people, solving real problems over many generations. Next item, please. The barkin. There's another object that fascinates me from a different reasons. This barkin, a wooden headrest carved from a single wood with one supporting column that gently carved rest on the top. The example I'm showing you dates from the late 19th century, and its surface is decorated with careful carving geometry patterns that will have taken considerable amount of time, skill to reproduce it or to produce it. A headrest seems like a curious object to devote so much care to. You sleep on it. It is not something displayed for visitors or worn in public, yet the craftsmen gave it the same attention they might have given an object intended for admiration. That tells me they were doing far more than solving a practical problem. They were creating something that reflected pride in their work and respect for the person who would use it. The barkin also reminds us that design is rarely isolated. It exists in conversation with other aspects of life. The carved rest supports the head while protecting elaborate hairstyles, such as the one we have just seen. Hairstyles that could have taken hours to create were not meant to be flattened overnight by an ordinary pillow. The height, the curve, and the proportion of the headrest were all shaped by a deep understanding of a person who would use it. When I look at the barkin, I do not simply see a beautiful carved object. I see evidence of society thinking carefully about everyday life. It reminds us that craftsmanship is not only about making beautiful things, it is about understanding people well enough to create objects that genuinely improve the way they live. Next item, please. The necklace. This is the first time I have seen a necklace like this, and only through a photograph from a private collection. What first caught my attention was not simply that it was beautiful. It communicated. Before a woman introduced herself, the necklace had already begun telling part of her story. It could indicate where she came from, and in some communities, whether she was married or unmarried. Across Africa, different societies developed their own ways of expressing identity. Some use scarification, others use hairstyle, clothing, or jewelry. Every society develops a visual language that people within that community immediately understand. This necklace belongs to the same tradition. Today, we usually discover these things through conversation, official document, or social media. This necklace performed the same function without a single word. It worked because everyone around the wearer understood what it meant. What interested me just as much as the necklace itself was how difficult it has become to find it. I have never seen one in person, I have never seen anyone wearing one. I've never met anyone still making one. The only place I have encountered this is through a photograph. When an object becomes this rare, it is rarely only the object that has become rare. The craftsmanship becomes rare, the material becomes harder to find, the people who understand this meaning become fewer. That to me is a real loss, because once the knowledge disappears, even the most beautiful objects can no longer tell its story. That is the reason I wanted to share this necklace with you today. Because not because I expected everyone to recognize it, but because it reminds us that there are still many objects across Africa quietly waiting to be rediscovered, documented, and understood. They may no longer be part of everyday's life, but still they have something to teach us about the society that created them. Sometimes we assume heritage disappears because nobody cares about it. I do not believe that is always it's always true. Most often, it disappears because nobody realized it was disappearing until little remained. That is why documenting matters. It gives us the opportunity to record not only the object itself, but also its story, its purpose, the knowledge that allowed it to exist. When I first saw this necklace, I had the same thought I had throughout this lecture. If it disappears tomorrow, who could make another one? Not something that looks similar, but something made with the same understanding, the same technique, and the same cultural knowledge. That question has stayed with me ever since, and it's the same question that eventually led me to begin looking for much more closer at the objects I remember from my childhood. Next image, please. Over the past few years, I've made a broader decision to return to many of my traditional methods that I grew up with. Linen and cotton instead of synthetic fabrics, leather shoes instead of rubber and plastic, basil, turmeric, and frankincense instead of much of what fills our modern bathrooms, unsi instead of commercial perfume, kohl instead of eyeliner, henna, and other natural plant-based ingredients that have been used for generations. None of this choice was dramatic on its own. Together, they come from the same realization. Many of the materials our parents and grandparents trusted were not simply traditional. They were often healthier, more sustainable, and better suited for our bodies, our climate, and our way of life than many of the products that gradually replaced them. That return became more deliberate when I began writing The Kitchen Vanity, a personal book project exploring traditional beauty, self-care practice from different cultures, including Somali. Many of these traditions are shared across Africa, the Middle East, part of Asia, and each culture adapts it on its own way, while preserving its own identity. When it came time to photograph the ingredients and the objects for the book, I did not want a modern version that merely resembled what I remembered. I wanted real things, the same kind of things that my mother and my grandmother would have recognized and used to themselves. That decision eventually sent me looking for two objects in particular. The first object was a dabqat, an incense burner. The second was a traditional coal bottle in Dakusha. Next object, please. I remember my mother preparing to leave the house, placing unsi inside the dabqat and letting the fragrant smoke rise through her clothes and her hair. Its shape was never accidental. It was designed to sit beneath the hair so that the fragrant smoke surrounded the person rather than fill up the room. As a child, I accepted this with no question. It was simply part of everyday's life, and years later, I wanted one like the one I remembered. I assumed it would be an easy thing to find. It was not. I searched for a long time before I finally found one. At first, I was simply very pleased to have found it. Then, I started looking closely. The inside was not properly finished. The base was not completely flat. And it didn't feel steady. And sorry, so now you're back. Okay. So you can see from the inside and the base. Thank you. So the inside was not properly finished. The base was not completely flat. It did not sit steadily, and it felt differently from the one I had grown up with. That difference stayed with me because it made me ask a different question. What had changed? The object still exists. The purpose still exists, but something along the way, some of the attention to detail have disappeared. The craftsmanship rarely disappears all at once. It changes little by little. A finish becomes rougher, a proportion shifts, a material is replaced. Each change seems insignificant on its own until one day you realize you're no longer holding quite the same object. Objects often survive longer than the standard that was produced them. That is why documenting the object alone is not enough. We also need to document the judgment behind it, how it should feel, how it should balance, how it should be finished. Those things are rarely written down. They exist in the experience of people who still know, and that knowledge is every bit valuable as the object itself. Next item, please. The call bottle, or indakusha. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The second object I was searching for was a traditional Somali call bottle. Call had become part of my same returns. I wanted traditional call bottle, not modern packaging, because I intended to use it every day, just as my mother and my grandmother did. I assumed finding one would be straightforward. It was not. I eventually found one in a Somali shop in Africa, and I was delighted until I looked more closely and saw the word made in Pakistan. That would be good. We're not there yet. So I looked closely and the word made in Pakistan beside the handle. What stayed with me was not that it was made in elsewhere. It was that I had gone looking for Somalian object and struggled to find one still being made by Somalian craftsmen. The bottle still exists. The craftsmanship behind it has become much harder to find. That moment changed my thinking. I no longer wanted simply to own a coal bottle. I wanted to understand it, study it, and study the original example, and work with people that are capable of producing it with the same care earlier generation had given it. Not as a copy, but as a continuation. Because if I wanted to use this object every day, somebody had to keep making it. Otherwise, one day, it will exist only on photographs, museum collections. I still use it every day, not because it belongs to the past, but because it still belongs to the present. When I looked back at these two experiences, I realized they were really not about the Raqad or coal bottle. They were about something much more larger. Both objects still exist, yet finding examples that reflect the quality, craftsmanship, and understanding I remember, has become unexpectedly difficult. That was the moment I realized the greatest risk was not that we would lose the objects. It was we would lose the knowledge that gave them life in the first place. That realization eventually led me to create what I now call the continent Africa. Next image, please. Throughout this lecture, I have shared objects from Somalia. The objects are Somali, the question is not. After more than 25 years working with museums, historic collections, and craftsmanship in different parts of the world, I realized I was encountering the same challenges wherever I went. The countries were different, the history was different, the culture, the materials, and the tradition were different, yet the pattern kept appearing. Museum preserves objects, archive preserves record, practitioner preserves techniques, communities preserve memory. What was often missing was a relationship between them. Collections survived while the knowledge associated with them became increasingly difficult to access. Archives remained unused while the skills they documented quietly disappeared. Experienced practitioners retired without passing on everything they knew to a younger generation, because further removed from the knowledge system that had shaped their society by inherit. An object can remain in the museum collection for centuries. The knowledge that produced it can disappear within a single generation. I recognized this long before I focused my attention on Somalia. Early in my career, I curated an exhibition for International Fair in London. Next image, please. It brought together an urn reproduced under a license permission from Louvre Museum, hand-blown glass produced by Saint-Gobain, the world's oldest glass manufacturer, a lighting created by craftsmen I had previously worked with in the Palace of Versailles. Although each represented a different discipline, together they demonstrated how traditional craftsmanship from different fields could be brought together within a contemporary exhibition. Although the exhibition brought together objects from different places and different periods, every single piece depended upon one thing. Somebody still knew how to make it, remove any of those craftsmen, and the object might still be reproduced. But something essential would already have been lost. It might appear identical, but it will no longer carry the same depth of knowledge, judgment, and experience that gave the original its integrity. That experience stayed with me throughout my career, and it is the same question I have been asking throughout this lecture. Who still knows how this object was made? Who still understands the material? Who still knows the techniques? Who can still teach them? Once we find these people, we have both an opportunity and a responsibility to learn from them, while that knowledge is still living. Every traditional object is the visibility result of an invisible knowledge. If we preserve only the object, we preserve evidence of the past. If we continue the knowledge, we invest in the future. For me, that is the real purpose of heritage. It is not simply to protect what has survived. It is to ensure that the knowledge which created it continues to live alongside it. That belief eventually became the foundation of the continent Africa. Next image, please. The continent Africa. The question eventually became the continent Africa. I believe we already possess one of the greatest resources needed to answer that: our museums. When I look at museums across Africa, I do not see a lack of potential. I see craft people, elders, researchers, educators, young people, and communities who could all be brought together in one place, not simply to display heritage, but to demonstrate it, teach it, practice it, and pass it on. At the heart of the continent of Africa is a simple but continuous relationship. Historical records inform practice. Practice informs teaching. Teaching informs interpretation. Interpretation strengthens public understanding. Public understanding reinforces long-term relevance. Archives lead to practitioner. Practitioner leads to apprentice. Apprentice leads to institution. Institution leads to community. Community inspires the next generation of practitioner. Rather than existing as a separate activity, each one supports next and creates a continuous circle in which knowledge remains active rather than static. Imagine what this could look like in practice. A museum where display sits alongside working ateliers, where a resident craftsperson creates history objects using traditional techniques while visitors observe it and observe the process. Experienced practitioner train apprentice within the museum itself, ensure that the knowledge is passed directly from the generation to the next. Researchers document living techniques, while communities contribute stories, memories, local knowledge that may never have been recorded. School visit, not simply to look at the collection, but to meet the people who still possess the skills behind them. The museum begins to change. It no longer serves only as a place that protects the past. It becomes a place where the past communities continues to shape the future. The benefit extended far beyond the museum itself. Craft people gain recognition, meaningful careers, and opportunities to pass their knowledge with dignity. Young people gain practical skills, apprenticeship, and a strong connection to their own culture inheritance. Researchers gain access to living knowledge. Visitors experience heritage as something active rather than static. Local entrepreneurs, tourism, education, and creative industries all benefit from the institution that practiced in the community life instead of standing apart from it. Although today's example have come from Somalia, this work was never intended only for one country. Every African nation possesses its own material, technique, craftsmanship, and ways of transmitting knowledge. Each has something valuable to contribute to the other. A woodcarver in one country may preserve techniques relevant to another country. A textile tradition developed in one region may inspire practitioners elsewhere. This is not about creating one Africa identity. It is about recognizing the strength that already exists within each country and creating opportunities for that knowledge to continue, to be shared where appropriate, and to remain rooted where it belongs. For me, museums should become more than a place that preserve collections. They should become places where knowledge is practiced, craftsmanship is valued, and young people are trained, communities participate, heritage remains part of everyday's life rather than something observed only through a glass. That is the vision behind the continent of Africa, and is the work I intend to dedicate the rest of my career to. The call to action. I would like to leave you with one final thought and one simple request. Not next year, not when funding becomes available, not when new project is announced. Today, for centuries, much of African knowledge has passed from one generation to the next through everyday life. Children learn by observing, listening, and working alongside parents, grandparents, and elders. That system worked because it reflected the way people lived. Today, our lives are different. Families are spread across towns, countries, and continents. Many of us, myself included, live in diaspora. Children often grow up far from the people who once passed the skills on naturally. The value of oral transmission has not changed. The circumstances that allowed it to flourish have. I do not believe the answer is to replace those traditions. I believe the answer is to strengthen them by adapting them to the world we live in today. For the first time in history, almost every young African carries a camera, an audio recorder, and a publishing platform in his pocket or her pocket. Previous generation could have never imagined such an opportunity. What was once impossible has become part of our life. So I would like to ask something of you. When you go home, look around your house, find an object that has been part of your family for years. It could be a chair, a farming tool, a cooking utensil, textile, a piece of jewelry, or an instrument of any that has simply always been there. Ask your parents, your grandparents about it. Who made it? Where did it come from? And why did your family keep it? What does it remind them of? Listen carefully, because the object is only part of the story. The knowledge lives in the person telling it. If they are willing, photograph the object, record the story, share it. Not because every object belongs in a museum, and not because every object is rare, but because every family holds a knowledge that somebody else may recognize, learn from, or build upon. A story shared in one home can begin a conversation across a village, a country, and the African diaspora. I also believe we need to become better at recognizing the value of our knowledge before expecting others to recognize it for us. If we do not value our own craftsmanship, our own history, or our own way of knowing, we cannot expect anyone else to do it on our behalf. Every photograph taken, every story recorded, and every memory shared becomes another contribution to our collective knowledge. Not owned by one museum, one institution, or one country, but built by a million of people, documenting their own history in their own voice. We have inherited an extraordinary knowledge. Our responsibility is to ensure that it continues. We do not need to wait. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this lecture has encouraged you to look beyond the object itself and to think about the knowledge, the craftsmanship, and the people that makes our heritage possible. If today's conversation has left you with one question, I hope it is this. If this disappears tomorrow, could we make another one? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Munira, for this insightful presentation. This was lovely, and I'm sure the audience as well enjoyed listening to you. I would like to now give the floor to our audience. In case you have any questions, you can raise your hand and you can ask right away, or you can write it in the chat box and I will be sharing it out to Munira. I would like to start with the people who have already sent a few questions in the chat box. Okay, so we have Shamsa here. She said, as much as the crafted objects look and are as meaningful as they are, and it gets less appealing for youngsters, thus resulting in the culture being outgrown, how can we make heritage education more interesting for young people in this modern and digital world?
Sorry, I didn't hear that properly.
Okay, let me repeat again. Shamsa here asked, as much as the crafted objects look and are meaningful as they are, it gets less appealing for youngsters and thus resulting in the culture being outgrown. How can we make heritage education more interesting for young people in this modern and digital world?
So it's the same thing as what we want to do with the continent Africa, which means that we have to show them and demonstrate to them in a language that they actually understand. The current problem at the moment we are having is a lot of museums are still communicating in a language that the youth do not understand. And to make it more interesting to the youth, we need to communicate in a language they understand. So, of course, digital, and also trying to make those objects necessary and appealing to them. So an item that is old does not necessarily mean it cannot be modernized. It can be modernized and be used to a way that they will understand it. Imagine every single person or every single woman that I currently know uses eyeliner. We could do the indakusha or the eyeliner or the kohl in a traditional way that is more attractive for them, way that it can be transported easily in their bags, or it can be decorative in a simple way, or teach them how they can produce that at home, which is safer, sustainable, and costless.
Thank you. I think that answers her question. The next question is now towards you. Someone said, Sierra, what would you, from your personal experience, say is the biggest barrier preventing young Africans or Somalis from learning the traditional skills?
I would say it's the same thing. We're taking it for granted. We're always thinking that these things are always going to be there, and we need to have more value. And the thing is, because something is always there and always available, you don't see the necessity of it. For someone like me, who's currently living in Europe, I miss all our tradition. I miss all our culture because I don't see it anymore. I live in Portugal, and there's no Somalians here at all. So I've learned to appreciate it a lot more than when I was back home. So I think it's more about learning to value and understand. But we can also go a little bit further and start to, like I said, document these things. They can ask their family and try to understand the purpose of it and the reason that those things were made. If somebody actually understands the purpose of an item, there's more chances that they might use it than the person just being shown an object.
Okay, thank you. On to the next question. As we know about the skill transmission that you talked about, which is basically how the knowledge moved from one generation to another. And back in the day, it used to happen through traditional ways, such as apprenticeship, through our grandparents, storytelling, and all of that. So our next question here is by Nasteha. She says, as Somalis, the most successful way to pass down culture is through oral communication and storytelling. But in today's world, it's social media mostly. Do you think this impacts on the continuity of the craftsmanship and tradition? Do you think it's easier to pass down tradition in this modern world or back then when it was passed down through oral ways from one gentleman to another? For example, our grandparents or the community and also sharing the skill with us.
So I think that, yes, we could continue doing it on social media. And yes, it will. This is not taken away from the oral transmission that was being done over the years. There are some people who have that advantage of still being with their parents, still being with their elders. But I feel that the responsibility lies mostly on the museums. If we have museums that are actually live museums and quite frankly not static as they are at the moment, I think a lot of youth will take interest in it. And when they take interest in it, then it becomes much more fascinating for them and curious. So they would want to learn more because they will go, for instance, if we get the success of this continent Africa, in a museum, for instance, in Mogadishu, they will be able to enter the museum, be able to create objects with the craftsmen that are there, the master craftsman or the apprentice. Even just by observing it, they will understand the values of it, because For instance, I have just done a seminar not long ago where I took a carved chair, and everybody sees a carved chair, a flower on it, or somebody has done some carving, and they think it's super easy until you actually give them the carving thing, and then they try it and they realize that somebody has spent such an enormous strength to carve those things. So the appreciation changes. They become much more appreciative of it.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Next, now I would like to take a break from reading the comments and now give it to the audience who are raising their hands so that they can also engage with you. Okay. So from the audience, you can open your mic and ask your question right away.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation and for answering the questions. My name is Chukwubikem Onwameze. I am Nigerian and I'm a cultural heritage researcher and enthusiast. Particularly, I am most interested with working with younger people because I believe they are the deciders of what heritage could be in the future. So their voices being silenced oftentimes in heritage conversations is another way of erasing heritage because it's no longer sustainable, in my opinion, because if they don't appreciate, if they are not taught about their heritage or their identity, if they don't appreciate these things, we lose that touch of continuity. We lose that touch of transferring knowledge to the generations that will tell the story in the future. Then to build on the question that you've already answered on how we can build the interest of younger people in museums and all, I think oftentimes we have this presumption that younger people are not interested in heritage conversations or in heritage generally. I think it's often wrong because I've had this assumption when doing one of my research, and I had this presumption that I cannot involve the younger people because they are not interested. But when I got to this show, that the reverse was the case. They were really interested in the conversation, but the problem is, do we even involve them? So it starts from us, even from the communities. It starts from the museums as well. It starts from the communities. It starts from the parents. Because we talk about our heritage in vague because we don't even tell them the stories. We don't pass down this heritage to the people, to the younger people, to our children. And then it makes them because they don't know, they cannot contribute to the conversation. But when they know about these things, when they know about their heritage, it's built their curiosity. And I also agree with what you said about, practical involvement, giving them the opportunity to participate fully, to do something, to understand how the people that actually did this thing did them. Because in the process of involving them, it creates that, museums oftentimes have this stereotype of being the loudest voice that speaks in the room. And then every other person is silent, and younger people or this generation do not really appreciate that. They always want to be involved. They want to speak. They feel they have the right to speak and they want to air their views and opinions, which is really important. And if they are not given the opportunity, they just lose interest in the conversation. So while we are doing our parts as community members, as parents, as enthusiasts, as researchers in involving the younger people, museums also play that role of involving them as well through practical, exhibitions or co-creating with the younger people or co-creating with them. So I think younger people are really interested, but it's built down to how we involve them. Yeah, so that's my opinion. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, for me, I think we haven't made it very interesting for the youth because some of them who are curious to actually get involved in the heritage because they are hungry for knowledge. It's just that we're not communicating in a language they understand. That is the issue. And secondly, they fear that it's not worth embarking on that knowledge because it's not paid enough. The governments, and I'm apologizing to say this, but it's the bluntness of saying it, don't take it as seriously as they should, and they don't feel like there's a career in it. So they tend to ignore it more. And the most saddest part of all of it, and this is something that I love about Nigerians, you do not play about your wares. Like you, everywhere you go, you have to wear your traditional attires, and Somalians are equally the same. But that insistence of that, you can see it being transmitted even onto the youth. So you see the youth, wherever they go, they're still wearing the same attires. Us Somalian, we're still wearing our dira'an, we're wearing our other clothes. That is very important. When you make it relevant, of course, the younger people also see the relevance on it, and then they continue with it. If there's no money into it, if there's no interest into it, it's difficult for them to actually embark into it. And what we need to do is to start telling the story differently. If we involve craftsmen, for instance, in a museum where they actually get paid, and they're paid because something is taking place every single day, they will have dignity in that job, and they will want to actually get into it. Our attires, they can be fashionable. Our living can be fashionable. What was once an old antique does not necessarily mean that it has to stay in that stagnant moment. It can be adapted. It's still telling the same story, but in actual fact, it's now involving the youth. So if the youth understand it, I think they will adapt it. But it starts with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for participating in that. Next, we'd like to take another question from the audience. Or would you guys like me to read from the comments?
I'm following your instructions.
I'm waiting for one person from the audience to either speak up for themselves or I continue reading the ones that we have over here. Okay, moving on. I'll read one from here. Noor here said, globalization has created indistinguishable and intermeaning of cultural weather through social media exposure or other channels. It seems inevitable that we'll adapt to certain culture beyond what our parents or ancestors have placed. Is it really possible to keep the culture and preserve it in the states which you presented?
Yes. I feel like we can continue it. We can make it even much more elaborate. We can make it more interesting. Of course, something like the barkin, the headrest, which was used sometimes when people were going to take care of the camels in the deserts, or they would use it in their house, can also become an object of art, and they can become something that the youth can use if it's adapted into a style that is modern and usable each day. So I think, yes, we can keep the heritage going. We just need to make it interesting, and we need, again, to communicate a language the youth understand. Because at the end of the day, they are our next generation, and they're the ones who are going to keep this going.
Thank you. I think Khawla also made a comment before I share whatever she said. She said, Ali, when you're presenting, this is the beauty of our African culture. Sometimes we share cultures with different communities outside our own community, and that's a very beautiful thing. When you shared the Gambar, Khawla made a comment, said that Gambar was also available. She saw it in Lamu. Lamu is a place in Kenya, a city in Kenya. They also have it. And I think that's a very beautiful thing. Sometimes the idea of knowing someone else's culture makes you realize that we all have a common thing at the end of the day, and we share different things.
Absolutely. This particular one, for example, it's because of the colonizations. We had, all Lamu, Zanzibar, and all the way to Sudan, Djibouti, and all these places they have exactly similar stool. Because it was actually easier to make since it's just a sheepskin and wood. But it's a shared culture because we were also partly colonized by the same people.
Okay. And also she left a comment for you. Said, your photography, your documentation, and the way you narrate the stories are a gift, Munira. Thank you for opening our eyes to these hidden gems and sharing the heritage. Despite many challenges that call for our attention, your lens makes culture very vividly alive. And I would like to share her question. She asked a question recently. And Sorry, 1 second. Okay. I know a colleague who gave so much time to his expertise to volunteer until he eventually stepped away completely. Involvement and recognition are not a must, but they are a gift that uplifts and motivates people to keep contributing, especially because this field is dependent on that and collaboration. Some of us are hanging out by a thread of passion. What we need is meaningful collaboration that values and includes and empowers those who are willing to learn from this. And I think she is one of the youth that are here with us today who are very much interested in culture. And she's an example of the fact that today's generation are also interested in history. We want to be part of it. We love it. And we are looking for ways to participate in all of this. Thank you so
I
much.
I think that that's what I said earlier. You are hungry for the knowledge. It's just that the way it's being transmitted is not the way that you guys understand. So this is the reason why at the end of my lecture, I asked if we can all start to collect what we have in our homes or in our grandmother's homes or grandfather's homes, even if we think that is because again, we take these things for granted. So we see the stool at our grandfather's house, we think everybody has this in their home. It's not true. And you don't, for instance, just right now, you had somebody from Lamu saying that they had the same stool. So it's engaging, it's bringing in a conversation, and it's getting people to talk. And once we are all talking about it, we are actually sharing knowledge and we are sharing the way of life, which makes it much more interesting for the youth, because each time somebody speaks from a different household, that person tells a different story. And through that, you find that you actually have a whole entire scenario about a stool.
True. And thanks to organizations such as Hayaan, we get opportunities to engage with other people and realize, hey, someone else's culture also has the same thing that we do. Paula, if you'd like to open your mic and also engage with Munira, that's fine. I've seen you've written
Hello.
up.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
I'm so happy to be here. I got to meet Munira on LinkedIn, and I've been following her work and what Hayaan is doing. It's very inspiring, and I feel so happy to be part of this webinar. Not only did I save it on my calendar, but I also kept alarm reminders so I could join, because I just love being involved in platforms that empower me more. And from what my brother from Nigeria shared about involvement and interest, and not confusing between the two. And we shouldn't always wait for an involvement from the government or from museums. We can also get involved in webinars like Hayaan, what Hayaan is doing, following people who educate us and inspire us. So, as I said, we are hanging by a thread of passion, but initiatives like this are very instrumental in nurturing what we love and what we care for. And we hope as Africans, as young people, we will get more of these opportunities, like Munira sharing her knowledge freely with us, so that we can continue safeguarding our heritage. Asante.
Asante. Thank you so much. I'm finally getting to meet you. I've been talking to you. So yes, what I was saying is I'm willing to, right now I have dedicated my expertise and my time to Africa. I am actually thinking of moving there. So I will be sharing a lot more. And I'm also looking forward to learning from everybody else, because I also need to know and learn about our culture, our objects. I'm always very, very curious. But I think that unless we change our ways of how we are displaying our museums or how we are communicating our knowledge and our craftsmanship, it's not going to change very much as we are right now. So the best thing is communicate, whether it's through TikTok, whether it's through Instagram, whether it's through anything. I have seen so many of Somalian heritage, African heritage being displayed in such a beautiful way. And I have learned so much from that this last few months. And I encourage everybody to continue doing the same thing, because it's the only way we can survive.
Okay, we have one more question from Hanad. He says, I am an architecture student with a strong interest in architectural heritage, especially documenting and writing about Somalia's historical buildings. However, one of the biggest challenges I face is that many of these buildings have never been officially documented or written about. What would you recommend I do in this situation?
Create your own. That's what I would say. And if did he say it was based in Somalia?
No, he didn't specify. Hanad, you can also unmute yourself and maybe engage.
Never mind. So what I would say is, so it's in Somalia. So in Somalia, you have the most beautiful clay, that the same one that you're using for the Raqad. That clay is heat resistant, which is perfect for your climate. What I find very difficult at times in Africa is we are creating modern homes that are not adapted for our country. So I think that if you're looking for inspirations, don't, I understand that because of the unfortunate war, we don't have very much examples to go by. But what you could do is try to find either books that are very, very old that displaying the really ancient ways of constructing homes and buildings in Somalia, because you will find that those houses are, one, sustainable, they control the climate correctly, they adapt to the environment much more better than these modern homes that you're seeing now that are being made where somebody's sitting on AC the whole entire day. Our old homes did not require that. They were adapting. So I think that the best way to do it is to go back into the really old traditional ones and adapt it to the modern life. So you can make it 2 floors, 3 floors if you want, but use the same materials that you find on the ground.
Well answered. To add on to Hanad's discussion, I very much agree with him that as Africans, most of our history is given mouth to mouth, like literally it's transferred from one generation to another, grandparents to grandkids, like that. And it's very rare to find that history is written down. And I feel like as the coming generation, one of the things that we need to put so much focus is when we learn a certain history or a certain backstory to our culture and everything, it's very important that we start documenting it. And this is also me telling everyone who is in this webinar, if you get an opportunity to discover a historical fact about our country, you can be the one to write it. Okay, so far we don't have it, but we can be the generation that writes it down. So Hanad here is an architect student, right? Like you said, there's so many historical buildings in Somalia that haven't been documented. You can be the one to start with. So you can, as an architect, you can go ahead and get started on documenting the history behind those buildings. And I'm sure so many people will appreciate, and not many people will have that question in future webinars. Okay. I think that's all of the questions that we have from the audience. I will give another minute and another chance to anyone who wants to raise their hand. And
I actually also saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in Mogadishu you have in the museum a lot of cassettes, recording cassettes of, I think either it's poems or stories. I don't know if it's telling the techniques or not. I'd be very curious to find out about that.
anyone from Hamad to answer that question?
Let me voluntarily answer your question, Munira. Yes, it's not the museum, but it is National Archive.
Okay.
It's not. Let me explain. There is no such thing called National Archive of Somalia, but the Radio Mogadishu has a audiovisual archive, which contains more than 22 million voices, as he told me, the director of the archive. Most of them were overlooked, were not documented, were not digitalized, even though recently Japan government and UNESCO collaborating to digitalize it, but it is very, very unique. One of the uniquest audiovisual archives in the Horn of Africa. It's almost 90 years old.
Wow.
Beside Radio Mogadishu's archive, there is another archive in Hargeisa, which is 10 years, almost 10 years older than the Mogadishu one. It was established 1943. So most of them were kept, but it was not digitalized. There are many problems facing in terms of the temperature of the rooms they were stored, and the I don't know how to say, most of people who are dealing with these archives are not aware of the significance of this material. So it's not a national archive, but it's a kind of it can be a national archive, but it doesn't have that name.
Thank you. But that's one of our issues. For example, these things are gold. Yeah. And we don't see that until one day when we don't have any more of this. Because, of course, Somali is very well known for its poems, and it's also the language that it has. Since Somalia was almost, apart from Ethiopia also, but Somalia has the only people who sustained the language. So these kind of audios are very crucial to our culture and for continuity of it. So somebody will need to go and document this one day and take it seriously before it's too late.
Definitely. Another thing that the youth and the coming generation needs to work on is preserving most of the stuff that haven't been. Nastefa has risen her hand. I think she has a question for us.
Hello, hi again. I'm back. So I wanted to ask you a question because, okay, personally, I'm an archaeology recent graduate, and when I was doing studies and preparing my thesis, and I asked people like, okay, have you seen? I was working on a topic, a site in Somalia, so I was asking people, have you seen, anything written about this? Do you have any idea? Because until my thesis, I had no idea about any archaeological site in Somalia, and no knowledge about archaeological sites in Somalia. Nothing at all. Nothing about archaeology and history in Somalia. I was raised in Kenya, so I did not have any knowledge about that. And I was studying in Turkey, so people there also had no knowledge. My professors had no knowledge. The students, no one had any knowledge. So I was talking to the fellow students, Somalis, who might have an idea since they've lived in the country. And everyone would say, what are you studying? I would say archaeology. And they would be like, what is that about? A lot of discussion about what archaeology is. And at the end, they would be like, so you just want people to know about our culture? And I'm like, it's not just the culture, but yeah, maybe a part of it. And the end question was always like, so you want us to still have that name of we're very loud, we do this. And recently, we've been on the news a lot where Somalis come to a place and they bring their culture out. They bring their Somali out. And it turns out it becomes a dominating culture in most of the places they go to. You will know a Somali when, regardless of whether we wear the clothes or not. It's always very, visible. So people are like, this mixture of cultures, they will bring the loss of the less dominant cultures. Like the example was given was Somalis in Nairobi, like in Slee. I don't know if you've been there, but yeah. It's very Somali. You will barely see any Kenyan culture in the place. And so they're like, you went and settled in the place, migrated to the place, settled it, and you've taken over the entire place and brought out the loss of the culture. So they're like, is it a good idea to mix cultures? Like if it's going to bring out the loss of another culture, while you're trying to promote yours, you're going to be the reason another culture is lost. So is it a good idea to mix cultures? I didn't have enough answer then I was a student. I still don't have enough answer. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about mixture of cultures bringing out the loss of another?
I think that as long as you're not going to knock on people's houses and start making them eat anjera, you're good.
But you're wearing your clothing out there.
And for instance, I'm in Portugal. I live between Portugal and France. And every single time I go to every event, whether it's an ambassador or as government officials or anything, I go with my attire. I don't know any other clothes that I'm super proud of wearing than the one I'm wearing. So I go with my dira'a because that's my identity. And if you're comfortable with your identity, you shouldn't be able to affect other people. The problem is when people impose their identity on other people. So I think that we can be respectful of other people's cultures, but can also sustain our, because this is our identity. We cannot strip it off us. So going somewhere where you're in a community such as Isli, as long as I think people are not doing the wrong things, if it's just creating businesses and creating, bringing in the culture, there is nothing wrong with it. I mean, Indians are doing that. A lot of other communities and cultures are doing it. And I don't see what's wrong with that.
Yeah, like what I mean is when you're in Somalia and then there's a foreigner that comes to the country, the first thing a Somali mother will come and then she will hand you a dirham, or she will be like, you know what, maybe eat this food. And whether you have food with you, your own food or something, she will be giving you some things. As a culture, in our culture, it is the giving is an art we have. But to them, it might be like, okay, so this person wants you to have their culture. Like maybe they're educating you, but they're giving their culture. And you cannot be coming there to wear your Portuguese clothes. If you're wearing the clothes from the Portuguese clothes, and you're in Somalia, you're going to be thinking, maybe it's awkward. Maybe I should respect the culture and maybe wear what they wear. Like, you get that thought. But as Somalis, when you go to another place, it's very rare we think of that. So when we go to a place, we do not embrace the culture, we educate our cultures on them. So that is where the question is. You want to force your culture on us kind of thing? Whether it was directly or indirectly.
I think you can please everybody in the world, but you could stay strong and keep your identity as you are. I think that if somebody is coming to Somalia, it's because they're interested in Somalis and they're interested in knowing our culture and understanding who we are. Otherwise, they wouldn't come. So if they're coming there, yes, throw in the dir'a, give them some anjera. It's our culture. And if they don't want, of course, they're old enough or polite enough to be able to say no. I think that, especially when I'm looking, for example, in England or anything, I don't see any issues. I mean, there's a lot of Somalis in London, for instance, who are just adapting as usual. And yes, you are always going to get the people who might not be satisfied with what you're wearing, but then again, you can't please everybody. And the most important thing you have to understand, when you're subtracting something from yourself, by giving someone else something, you're, diminishing your identity.
That's a strong word.
No, by giving every single time, you're subtracting from you. So try not to do that. I think the key is to be respectful of everyone and everybody, but at the same time to stick to your identity, however strong it is. This is our way of keeping our heritage and our culture.
To a certain extent, sometimes Somalis do appropriate other people's culture. At some point, there might be a time where, I don't want to say it's in a way the obsession, but there's a time where Somalis loved Indian culture. I don't think the current generation have that.
They get into Bollywood.
Or into the movies, the outfits. There's a time it was wearing the Indian sari, and I was like, okay, so now we are actually trying to practice other people's culture. So I think
Japanese.
But also Arab.
Oh yeah, Arab is also a thing. Yeah. So there was a debate recently about how we should practice our own culture in our weddings and stuff, and people are saying, why are we robes and all of that in our weddings when we have our own cultural clothes? So at the end of the day, like the whole concept of this webinar being preserving our own culture, we need to find ways of making our culture fit our current modern lifestyle. So whether it's finding fashion designers, which recently there's actually a lot of fashion designers who can design wedding attires that incorporates the current fashion trends and our culture and, our prints and all of that. So I think it's just a way of us finding the youth interesting ways of making our culture be part of our current lifestyle and the things that we do recently. Here in Nairobi, I think the youth, I'm from Kenya, by the way, so the youth here actually try as much as they can to show the Somali part. Like, for example, now we have a 3-day event that's going on because of the Somali independence. And I love that because the details of everything is Somali inspired, whether it's the colors of the event, whether it's the attires of the people are wearing the Somali outfits, but it doesn't have to be like the actual traditional clothes. You can wear a shirt or a dress that has the Somali imprint in it. So this is modern ways of the youth trying to find ways of incorporating their culture into their current lifestyles instead of just, doing things how normally other people would do, especially youth that are away from their country, especially the youth that are the Somali youth from Kenya. Although they give us a name, they give us a nickname, but we try as much as we can to keep Somali identity, and we're trying to learn. So I'm part of that youth that's trying to learn the Somali heritage and finding new ways of practicing it in a foreign land. So, yeah.
No, but I think it's important, and I have seen some beautiful attires being made that were not being made before. But the most important thing is what I would say to the youth, when we're trying to learn and adapt our culture to something else, it's very important that we study what we're adapting, because sometimes you're actually taking on something without understanding it, and you're mixing it and making something that is definitely not yours, but also has a very significant importance in it that might not be in your favor. So it's very important that we try to see and have critical thinking in where something had come from and do our research prior to adapting it.
There was an example during Eid where girls were buying a dress. All of them, like it was like a fashion trend. Everyone was buying the dress, and turns out the dress was just a night dress for another culture. I don't know which country it was, but it was a night dress. It's like the dilla you stay at home with, and you use it as a Eid dress. And the other people were reacting in a way that was like, "Are you sure you want to wear this out?" And that's why, like, you need to research what you want to take.
Yeah, for instance, lately I've been seeing a lot of brides that are carrying the bouquet. I've seen a lot of Somalis which they have like a small golden handbag. I don't really know the significance of that. I have to find out. But now they're adapting it into the bouquet. That's one of the examples that I want to give. The bouquet, the bouquet of flowers has a significance to it. The bouquet was used back in the days, and it was used actually to mask order. Because back in the days, people were not taking showers. So they gave the woman during her wedding a bouquet of flower to mask her odor. So that's the kind of things that I'm trying to say. We have to be sure we understand where those things are coming from prior to adapting them. I have seen a lot of Somalis where they're carrying this golden thing. I don't really know what that is.
The deal kind of thing that looks like deal, and it's golden.
Yeah.
Sometimes
is it a bag of something?
It's a modernized deal. It's a modern version of the deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, you know the deal, right? Like the one that
Exactly, yeah.
It's like made this size, and sometimes it has what do you say? The shash. They take shash and they surround it with it, and sometimes they use subaiyat, and then they cover it with it, then put a golden decoration. The golden is just a decoration, but the idea is that they. I think
so. Let's keep that. Skip the flower.
Yeah,
It sends the wrong message.
That sounds good. It makes sense. If you like the smell, put in the deal.
But thank God we have water now.
Yeah, thank God. There any other question from the audience, or Nastaha's question was the last?
There's one written down there. Check. I'm done.
Thank you.
Khawla here said, Brill publishes and leading university help document poems of renowned poets here in Lamu, perhaps a collaboration with them to digitalize that. I guess that's what you meant.
Yes,
maybe you can unmute
my brother shared about digitizing the songs if I got it right. So that was about preserving the song. So that's a suggestion. because they used community-centered approaches and involved young people in trainings. So that I would like it for Somalia as well.
Thank you. I think the Hayaan Heritage team is here and they are going to write that down and put in consideration in the future, inshallah. I think that's all from the audience, and I would like to now wrap up. So, as we come to the end of today's lecture, I'd like to thank Munira Bonnet for sharing her knowledge and experience with us. This was such a lovely, lovely session. Today's discussion has reminded us that preserving heritage is not only about protecting the objects from our past, but also ensuring that the knowledge, the skill, and the traditions behind them continue to thrive. And on behalf of Hayaan Heritage, thank you to everyone for joining us today and contributing to this meaningful conversation. We hope today's session inspires you all to think about how we can support and continue African heritage in our own communities. And before we close, Munira, would you have any final remarks or any last-minute advice you'd share with the youth today?
Yes, please share as much as you can in any platform you're capable of posting. Share as many objects as possible. Even if you find that it's not significant, we are curious. We want to learn and we want to understand. And every object has its own significance, or it has its own relevance. And if I don't find that relevance, someone else will. So it's important that we share as much as we can and start to value our heritage. And thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much for the lovely presentation. I think that's today, and thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to see you in future webinars.